few more minutes to participants to join.
Okay.
Refilwe, are you ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, greetings, colleagues, and welcome to this double barrel series. Firstly, it is my monthly In Conversation With, and this morning I have with us Professor Refilwe Nancy Phaswana-Mafuya, and you will learn a little bit more about her in a few minutes. But I also want to welcome all our colleagues who are sitting in with us as part of National Science Week. And for that, I want to thank the organizers, SASTA and NRF and the DSI for giving us this opportunity to showpiece this lecture, which is part and parcel of our celebration of the Women's Month. So yesterday we kicked off National Science Week with a fantastic launch of our COVID booklet, and please look at our website, and I will ask colleagues to share that on the chat in a little moment as well. But I do not want to take away my guest this morning. Refilwe and I have been partners on the ASSAf Council for a long time, and it's been a remarkable journey to share experiences and learn from her and work together on several issues. Prof Phaswana-Mafuya is presently a professor in epidemiology and public health, master of a public health program at the University of Johannesburg. I do want to make an apology for a misprint in the flyer that went on claiming that she was in fact part of the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation at UJ. Apologies, Refilwe, sorry we didn't pick that up, but she is the former Deputy Vice Chancellor at Northwest University. Refilwe is a person whose lived experiences are something that I wanted us all to engage with. From humble beginnings to becoming a postgraduate student and taking up opportunities that came her way, working hard, and then being able not only to shape her career as a publishing scientist, but she has tentacles that have extended in various avenues. And I have watched her, the way she mentors young graduates, the way she promotes and encourages women, and the way in which she does not shy away from opportunities to add her voice in the constructive advancement of science for one and all. Her CV is like a road trip from here to Johannesburg, even passing all the toll gates. But you can read a little bit more about her, and you will hear about her personal journey as she presents to us this morning. Refilwe, I am honored and most grateful for you for accepting my invitation to be with us to share this launch of Women's Month, and also to celebrate the way in which not just women, but scientists, hardcore scientists, are able to maneuver through all the speed traps and speed bumps, etc., to ensure that science and meritocracy reigns over all issues. Over to you, Refilwe.
Good morning, and thank you very, very much, Prof Himla, for such a kind introduction. Sometimes when you speak, I feel like you could do it on my behalf because you are so eloquent, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. I hope the audience will find the presentation valuable in one way or the other. I'm sharing this journey in a very personalized way, and that's what I like doing, so that many people can see themselves in my journey. Indeed, we are celebrating, and we've been dancing and ululating before we connected to say, this is Women's Month, this is National Science Week, and this is the ASSAf celebration of the twin important events. And my talk, as you would have seen from the posters that went out, is learning curves from my non-linear career journey. And I'll be conversing at this juncture with you together with the Executive Officer of ASSAf, Prof Himla. My presentation draws heavily from the book that will be launched end of this month, Vision Never Dies. And I'll cover a number of areas as displayed on the screen. And I must thank my postdoc for having helped me to prepare for this talk. In this book, you will find what I have said and much more. So I'll take you through the snippets of the book, and I must try and, yes. Yeah, so let me first take you through what do I mean by learning curves. I experienced many learning curves as I navigated through my nonlinear, my unprescribed, unpredictable path towards the noble vision of transforming, changing, and impacting lives. So I moved from learning curve to learning curve in my process of self-discovery and self-mastery as I developed abilities, capabilities, competencies, and proficiencies in my career. And you will see as I go through the learning curves that I have experienced that some of them were figurative colloquial curves, like they are not mathematical curves, they are based on my qualitative, my nominal or ordinal experiences that are not easy to quantify, to repeat or measure or verify. But they are important, they are personal, and they speak to certain contexts. And others were real, measurable, quantifiable curves, which would go slower initially, and because I would be in a learning process, I would grapple at times and then go faster or rapidly later, and at times plateau. And when my learning curve began plateauing, I would jump to the next challenge and then start learning again. So learning has been a very continuous process for me, just like it ought to be for anyone, because we know that the moment you stop learning, you stop living. And so critical to understand is that my journey, my career journey, was not some a priori algorithmic pattern that was shaped according to some pre-existing model with some fixed parameters. It was unprescribed and unscripted. It went on according to the nature of what I was doing, the context within which I was doing it, the momentum, and internal and external factors that I went through. But it is critical, to understand the fact that in a science journey, there's no quick fix. So my journey from being a village girl to becoming an award-winning fighter of pandemic was not an overnight event. It was a long process. Come with me now. Let's explore this. And I want to submit to you that any journey without learning curves will lend itself to being a mediocre career journey. for a journey to be outstanding, at least from my experience, you've got to have gone through learning curves, and you should still be going through learning curves. I'm beginning by taking you a little bit back, because for you to understand where I'm coming from in terms of these learning curves, you've got to have a feel of where I was raised and how I was raised, which I believe played a major role in my career journey. So my career journey began at a tender age. It didn't begin when I had a degree, when I pursued my postgrad studies. It began at home. And this was really a tough, colloquial, slow learning curve that I experienced as I grew up in a humble background, where my parents told me that my humble background, as I was confronted with it, was not a measuring stick of how far I could go. I must say, this seemed quite paradoxical. It was like a conundrum of some kind, given the realities that were before me. And my parents emphasized that what I saw, the context I was in, was not a determinant of my success. It was difficult to comprehend, couldn't make sense. It wasn't logical, especially when I look at the fact that I was born in Alexandria, where my parents were laborers in the midst of appalling socioeconomic conditions. I was having a tough childhood, growing in a remote rural village without proper facilities. A tough childhood where I was the second born child and the first born girl of the 6 siblings, raised by very loving and caring parents, but without any stable source of income. So I had difficult and impossible schooling years, walked 4 kilometers to school on dusty roads, under summer heats and winter colds. No water, when you get to school, you just have to go on. And I had many legs that looked so insurmountable, and I can, in fact, I can't exhaust the list. These are just examples. So around me, there was no science stimulation. I couldn't point at individuals that I would say, these are my science role models. I didn't have the luxury of having, science games, going to expos, meeting science ambassadors. And therefore, my view towards science was indifferent. I can't say negative, because I loved, asking questions. I was curious. I had an inquisitive mind, and so in that sense, I knew I would enjoy, being in a career that affords me that opportunity. However, I was indifferent because the prospects of science success, let alone science access from where I was, looked so delusional, far-fetched. And so I had an internal battle about the learnings that my parents were giving me, as they didn't make sense. And I asked them, why were they saying so? They said, it is because it is the truth. And they pointed me to the Holy Scriptures, which I couldn't contest because we were a believing family. So as an obedient child, I took in what they told me, and that helped me to have a positive outlook on life very, very early in my growing up. Let's move. So from there, I went through a figurative, colloquial, gentle curve, and I call it colloquial because it's not measurable, but it definitely was a learning experience where my parents instilled in me the fact that I was the captain of my own ship, in spite of my unideal environment. And what they did was, to capture me during the springtime of my life, to make me see beyond my current situation, and this had huge returns in my career journey. It developed the will to lead a life with a higher moral purpose, with noble goals, and to use the moral compass in whatever I do. And I understand even today why I can't sit and not go to schools and not share what I have experienced. It was instilled with me while I was very, very young. And they taught me to lead a life of purpose, a life of impact, governed and, by goals. I need to know what I'm doing and why am I doing what I'm doing. And I'm talking about semi-literate parents, and they acknowledge my potential. They were the first people to acknowledge the fact that I can do it. And indeed, I saw myself being exempted, from some classes at primary. They instilled with me that I have the power of choice, and that I should take responsibility for the consequences of the decisions that I make. And from that, I developed a very positive attitude of having better, bigger, higher dreams, even if my situation was actually projecting the opposite. And I began to want to do something to change, transform, and impact lives. And that's when my vision was birthed. Hence, the title of my book says, "Vision Never Dies," because it was, at this stage, I didn't even know how am I going to pursue that, that vision. But I grew up wanting to do something to change the context, my context, and the context of other people. And in time, I began to realize that knowledge, gaining knowledge, developing skills around the pursuit of knowledge through doing scientific studies and resolving problems was actually the passion of my heart. And because I had this concrete vision, I developed the determination to work hard. And I saw my parents working hard, and I also learned to persevere through and stay focused along the way. I've deliberately taken time to explain this because I believe it became the cornerstone of everything else that I did thereafter. In 2017, I was given an opportunity to share my career journey, and I shared it in a different way. I always have little time, so I give what I can give at any given time. But I was moved when the following comments were shared. Somebody said, "That lady brought tears to my eyes. I really aim to emulate her." And someone said, "Such great leadership, Prof, for President 2025. I don't think I'm a good candidate for that." And someone said, "You are an inspiration to our country." And this was after I had explained how uneasy, how uncertain the hurts, the struggles, the frustrations, rejections, that I have gone through. But in spite of that, I continued, even despite my background. Fast forward, if I were to talk about my background, I can take forever. Fast forward, what made our, and underscore our, because I don't recall having any study of my own except my doctoral study, and even my doctoral study, emanated, from another study. I've had the privilege from the word go of understanding the fact that in order to have impactful studies, and Prof Himmler asked me to really explain this, especially to upcoming scientists, how do you ensure that the studies that you are conducting are impactful? I went through the increasing, decreasing return learning curve. This is an S-shaped curve where you are slower as you try to acquire the skill, and you put a lot of effort and you put a lot of time, to understand how research is being done, having a teachable spirit, getting exposures, allowing yourself to be mentored. I went through that curve, and this, for almost 2 decades, I've been conducting studies, and as you navigate, you start to have the decreasing side, where you do your studies with much lesser effort. You learn even even newer things with lesser effort because of the experience that you have you have gained over the years. So firstly, it is very important that you should find yourself learning. If you are doing a study that does not bring out any new knowledge in one way or the other, even if it had been conducted before, probably not in the particular context you are in, probably some methods were done slightly differently from yours and whatnot, but you've got to aim to bring out something. And I learned at a very young age in my career that I don't do studies for the sake of doing studies. And sense of purpose, critical. Studies that address critical issues at that particular point in time tend to have more impact. Studies that are driven by passion, the ones that you won't catch a sleep at night, you think about them 24/7. How do we get an answer to this problem? So I really also personally had the passion to know more, the passion to learn more. I read a lot and whatnot, and ensured that as I conduct the studies with fellow colleagues, there was scientific rigor, what we call internal validity, where your methods are rigorous, so that you get results that are not questionable. And you also look at your external validity, making sure that you've got appropriate sample sizes that you can generalize your results to, and you explore all various sort of scientific strategies, when to do multi-stage random sampling, when to do cluster random sampling, when to do simple random sampling, when to use parametric methods, when to not use, or to use non-parametric, very, 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 very critical. And I had the joy of being exposed to such learnings, where I would fly to Washington, D.C. for a day or two to discuss how we are going to approach a particular study. So the studies were collaborative, multidisciplinary, focused on marginalized communities. And that was one of the things that drove me, to go deeper and deeper, because my vision, as I have already explained, to make a difference, especially to those that don't have access, don't have availability, as far as health is concerned, which is my field. Going faster, I also, had the privilege of being involved in networks and knowing people like Prof Himla, as she says. We've known each other for a very long time. I've met remarkable scientists that, are far older than me through a structure like ASSAf, and I could invite them to various activities. Those of you who listened to the roadshow last week, I went on and on to indicate how much of a sense of acknowledgement and a sense of belonging I developed, and the trust relationships and the roads being opened for me when I've done studies, to have avenues I can use to share the work that I have done. Now, I'm going to take you quickly, because the purpose of my talk is not for you now to become HIV scientists. I'm fully, aware of that, but I wanted to have something concrete to share as examples, to demonstrate the point about what I've mentioned. So we did a key implementation science study in non-clinic settings. We know our clinics are overflowing, people have long queues and whatnot. HIV testing is a problem, the stigma, the nurses are overwhelmed, and people experience negative attitudes and whatnot. Because of the strain that is being taken. So we thought of leveraging a community-based, point of care settings, where we can provide early HIV testing, which we know is quite critical, because when people know their HIV status early, they can do something about it early enough. And we wanted early ART initiation. And at the time when we did the study, we still were using the CD4 count, 500, and then it changed to 350, and then it changed to test and treat. And we adjusted our study as we went along, and we targeted people who disproportionately get affected by HIV. And in this case, we looked at men who have sex with men. And if you check the literature, you will see that men who have sex with men are more likely to contract the virus or to transmit the virus than the general population. And as we can see, this was a multidisciplinary team. And I didn't mention everyone. I think all in all, we were more than 20. So it was me and my team, my colleagues at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and my colleague at Rollins School of Public Health in Emory, plus our interns, postgrad students, co-investigators, co-principal investigators. Like, it's a huge team, and we bring a range of knowledge and skills, and such studies would have, like, you are able to attract huge sums of money. They are multi-year, multi-million rand policy focused, development focused type of studies. And what did we manage to do? We managed to achieve the primary outcome. In this case, it was viral load suppression. And we also achieved secondary outcomes, that is having increased number of men who have sex with men, being on early HIV testing, being on ART, being kept and supported, retained and monitored until they achieved viral load suppression. And we wanted to contribute to ending the HIV epidemic by 2020. And we could show at the end of our study, through engagement with policymakers, from the word go up to the very end, getting letters of support from them before we begin, and really getting their input on what is needed and whatnot. So the study was very responsive. I'm gonna run through this one, which had to do with a combination prevention of HIV among men who have sex with men, also where we wanted to keep those who are negative. And this was at a time when PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, was being introduced in the country. We were among the first, to test that, working with Prof Linda Gail Becker from Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, and my collaborators from the US, as well as our teams, huge teams. And what did we find? This was a prospective cohort with 3 time periods. So we checked at each time period how we were doing. And we had these assessment methods, which, some were self-reported, and we had biomarkers. And so we could cross-validate our results. And we found at time 3 that, our interventions, the combination prevention of biomedical, behavioral, and community level sensitizations and interventions of all sorts, as you can see here, led to reduced adverse health outcomes and high retention in care, because we checked the attrition rate and positive clinical outcomes, positive behavioral outcomes in terms of condom use, lubricant use, and STIs, reduced symptomatic STIs, and low seroconversions, which is what we really wanted to see as our primary outcome, that those who are negative really stay negative. And you will see with every study, study. There are multiple institutions, there are multiple funders like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes on Health and the government of South Africa, but as a developing country, we don't get sufficient research resources in our country. It's a challenge we need to face squarely, and that's part of the reason I'm in science networks, because evidence-based solutions. Without them, we cannot really deal with the problems that confront us. And this is yet another study, and this was a South collaboration working with fellow African partners on integrated biobehavioral surveillance survey and mapping population size estimation, just wanting to know what is our denominator when we talk about men who have sex with men. In Ghana, how many people are we talking about? Because without the denominator, we cannot determine the proportions, we cannot really plan and whatnot. This was a very very interesting dynamic study, worked on prevention of mother-to-child transmission, and we just said to ourselves, hang on, what happens to female sex workers? You know, because they are beaten up, there's always violence around them, they are judged and whatnot. And this is what I have loved about the work that I do. It has taught me not to judge anybody. And I was very humbled in our work with female sex workers, because I did quite a number of studies on female sex workers. And at some point, I even, when there was a complaint, you know, that the sex workers that were coming to our offices were flooding, you know, all the floors of the offices, and some of them bathing in there, you know, and this happened after the study site had gotten banned. So I had to have them in my home. And you know, I was humbled in various ways. I've spent hours on end with female sex workers. I had my own naive, you know, thoughts, and I learned a lot that there is a lot we do not know. There are different kinds of female sex workers. They provide different kinds of services. They come from different backgrounds, and most of them, they are coming from broken families, broken homes. They were thrown on the street. They have lost their self-confidence. They, you know, so we wanted to know what happens when a female sex worker is pregnant. Do they get the services? How can we avail the services? And we had mobile service vans where they could do HIV testing, where they could do PMTCT, PNC, and whatnot. And there are various publications that have gone out with each study. There are various reports and whatnot. So I also did a 10-country study. I had the privilege of being the overall principal investigator of a study that involved the North, South, East, and West of Africa, where I would sit in meetings that, you know, there would be simultaneous translations and whatnot, looking at what workplaces can do, you know, to manage HIV. This was at a time when, you know, 1 in every 5 employee was likely to have HIV. And I worked also with the government here, because following this 10-country study, we did the South African study. And one of the things we produced for that study was this book. And I must say, one strategy like that has been effective in conducting such huge studies is to leverage, you know, the knowledge, the skills of the respective countries to get the focal points. We had focal points in various countries. At the time, I was director of a regional HIV program, Sahara. So we had focal points, and then we could work with various scientists because a top-down approach will affect the impact of your study, and what you think you know, you will discover how naive you have been. So I can never, and I could have never traveled the journey I traveled on my own. So I acknowledge here the importance of collaboration, the importance of knowledge exchange, the importance of focusing on what is needed, the importance of building individual and institutional capacities when conducting research. And as I do my research, and here I've just given selected examples, science engagement was very critical, very pivotal, and some of you would know that I led the 9th ASSAf conference, where sometimes I play an activism role to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And I was challenging complacency together with other HIV activists, stakeholders, and so on. And ASSAf was one of the stakeholders I worked with, and they did, and I shouldn't say they, part of ASSAf, we did the nexus between science, policy, and society. And we know that the AIDS conference is the second largest medical meeting in the world. So this was a huge platform where we challenged, government against complacency, because HIV is still there. Although we can manage it through viral load suppression, we still are the epicenter of the epidemic, and we want HIV to stop being an epidemic by 2030. In other words, we cannot remove, people live longer, they're taking treatment, you don't die of HIV. So we cannot say there will be no person without HIV, but we want it to be controlled, just like any other disease. And now we're fighting COVID-19. Also following the conference, we revitalized the response in Northwest Province. The leadership said, let's reopen the Provincial AIDS Council, which had been closed. I was part of that, and these are the kind of opportunities you get to share the work that you are doing. And the Deputy President called me to cabinet to come and interpret. I actually felt like a Joseph in the Bible who was called to interpret the dream. So I went to interpret the declaration of commitment to end the HIV epidemic, which I had given to the Deputy President in at the ASSAf conference, and it was such joy to sit around ministers and to see the kind of commitment that they had around working jointly towards ending the epidemic. And before this, I had also had the privilege of running a regional HIV conference, and that's when I was declared a titan in the fight against HIV. And thanks to my mentor, Prof Shisana, who has always looked out for me. And again, I don't need to forget that I'm talking about learning curves. So I went through a figurative colloquial growth learning curve, which developed my ability and enthusiasm. This was in 2011, to engage as a leader, team player, and facilitate research dialogues with various stakeholders, because I was the custodian of these conferences, much as I also chaired one of them. Moving forward, I also had the opportunity again of a different form of science engagement, where I was editor-in-chief of our journal, which I relinquished a year or two ago. Prof Himmler, don't tell me my time is over.
2 minutes.
So
remember, this is a conversation. I still need to talk to you.
Yeah, let me you at least
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
of the studies on COVID, because I know you are very keen on COVID-19 work. When the pandemic landed, I got involved in various activities as outlined there, and there has been a number of publications, even media ones, that were put out there, and I am getting. What did I do now? It went to, sorry, I must have pressed one of the links. I'm sorry about that. We looked also at the differential impacts of COVID-19. There's a whole article on that. We looked at the relationship between COVID-19 and influenza to see if there are no shared determinants. We looked at competing health priorities, impacts of COVID-19 on healthcare services. And we published articles, and I did lots of radio talks, thanks to ASSAf as well. And those were some of the talks I've had, and there are podcasts of these talks. Did webinars of all sorts from my institution, University of Johannesburg, and through various other means, and participated in the African Union, made a webinar, and I must say this, I would have failed if I don't talk about the importance of investing in young scientists for sustainable and inclusive growth. This was what ASSAf said 3-4 years ago, and it still lives on. Without us investing in this, and I talk from experience, my journey became enhanced. I experienced a career progression learning curve because of the supports that I received from various institutions and the mentorships I received. And today, I am humbled to say I have a cohort of mentees whom I'm trying to build as I have been built. And these are the kind of people that need this kind of support. And many of these mentees come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and they've made it. So mentorship make young people thrive. This is my postdoc. Look at the amount of work she has done, the visibility, and she's part of the work of ASSAf. The Lindo meetings and whatnot, ASSAf engaged her, many other youngsters that one works with, and the appreciation you see for developing others. Young people are always looking for mentors that look like them, and they have the potential. They are ready for us to work with them. And Prof Himla, as I conclude, breaking barriers, I think you would want me to touch on this, that it's not easy. Women are in the minority in the sciences, they are in minority in higher education. So immediately, some are minority, some are minority, like double bind, as it is called. For example, being non-white and being female has its own unique challenges. So I took it upon myself to encourage others using my journey to continue breaking these barriers. And today my journey is used to inspire others, to say, if she did, you can. And it is no secret that women have to fight sexism, they have to fight racism, and the intersectional needs, the unique needs of minorities, and moving away from confining ourselves to particular frameworks of categorizing people. I've spent an awful amount of time going to schools, interesting and motivating young girls to follow careers in science. And yes, I will pause there. The rest is in the book, and we are very happy and thankful that we've gotten this opportunity. And I say we because I couldn't have done this without the support of my one and only postdoc, Dr. Edith Palani. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you very much. And as Tina Turner would have said, you're simply the best. So I dedicate this song to you because of issues of wanting to play music that's not licensed, with all the IP issues. I can't play it now, but I just want you to know that I'm dedicating that song to you. Thank you. And I'm really, really sorry that I've had to rush you, but this is supposed to be a conversation.
Yeah.
So we give you an opportunity to say a few words and then for me to converse with you. So I'm going to fire a few questions to you. Normally I would give people 1 minute. That's what they get on the radio to answer 10 questions in 1 minute. And so far on the radio station I listen to, Lotus FM, Chad Leclos has got the most number of questions of 11. But I'm not going to put you under that sort of pressure, but can you keep your answers short? I'm going to ask you 10 questions, and then there are a couple of questions in the chat, but it's my prerogative to go first.
Yeah.
And some of these are single answers, so let's see how well you do. What's your favorite food?
Guineas, magwinya. You know hot cakes?
Okay, and what's your favorite movie of all time?
Daddy's Girl. Well, is that what it's called? Yeah, Daddy's Girl. Daddy's Girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you've been a recipient of numerous awards. Which one do you value the most?
Oh, goodness. That's a difficult one. The National Science Award for Research and its Outputs, 15 years after completing my PhD.
Yeah, that's the NSTF in Kambule Award that you got in 2017. Excellent.
Yeah.
Which is your most cited publication?
My most
cited publication?
Oh, it's a publication that on a scientific methodology that we followed in conducting the first population-based survey on aging and health involving 6 developing countries, where we grabbed the methodology that we followed.
You've used the metaphor learning curves. You talked about an S-curve in your career. What was that turning point? Now, remember, this is a trick question. What is that turning point as being a seminal moment in your career?
The seminal moment in my career was when the Wellcome Trust it told me I needed to go to school. I thought I had finished.
Yeah.
And begin again.
Excellent. Right. This is a generic question. There have been many discoveries, people with Nobel laureates, etc., but others who have discovered things that have not really gotten Nobel awards. From your perspective, which scientific discovery do you think has had the most impact on you as a person? And if that same impact was in your career?
It was the HIV, when the HIV pandemic began, I was very new in my career, and I saw lots of people die and like flies. And when I saw how scientists came forward, to try and find a cure, in South Africa, because it happened according to my context, I became enthused, and that ignited my passion, and the treatment, management of HIV, you know, I can go on. I see you are cutting me there.
No, I mean, because, you know, these are things, these are questions that are not rehearsed. So I'm firing them to you to see what's in your head without prepared prompting.
Yes.
What annoys you the most?
Ooh. It's yeah, I can tell you that that's easy for me. It's very unbearable to have a lazy person around me. That is the worst out of me, like I am awful.
I can imagine, I can imagine.
You can't be around me if you are lazy.
What message, what lasting message would you like your children to know?
Oh, my children. It's the message that my parents gave me. I'm the author of my own destiny. They are not me. They have their own destiny to author. They have their own choice to make, and they must own up to the consequences of their own choice. And they must always dream bigger, think bigger, because there's so much to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, all of us have a bucket list of things we want to do before we say our goodbye to this living world. What is the number one thing on your bucket list to do?
To release my book. Because
but that's happening now. That's happening now.
Gone. and I'm launching the book. It's everything I would ever want to say.
Yeah, no, good. And I mean, I know you talked in your talk about role models, etc. Outside of, but which female person is your role model?
Olive Shisana.
That's your mentor and role model. Excellent.
Yes.
Now I'm just going to go to a few questions. In the meantime, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
Because there's a little bit that we want to put at the end. Seppo Majaka from ASSAf is asking, is there ever a contradiction between rigor and relevance in studies that are health-oriented and others?
I wouldn't say.
Okay.
You've got to have studies that talk to the context that give answers to question and do that rigorously. That is, have scientific methods that are appropriate for the particular design that following. However, we know different scientific methods have got pros and cons.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Someone says, looking at Refilwe's CV and achievements, I'd be interested to hear her tips on how to fit everything in, that's in inverted commas. What advice would you have regarding work-family responsibility balance?
Yeah. That is a very, very good question, a reality question that many, especially women grapple with, being mother, being wife, and my mentees are grappling with that. It is amazing. Like for me, what has been the most amazing is that my role model, my mentor was also my boss. And you know, you won't believe this. There was a time I was on the verge of resigning when I would get to work and they tell me the baby is ill and my husband is like 600 kilometers away. And then I spend the whole day traveling from, my place to my office and my job. And I said, I can't. And it was only that you are going to stay. You will work from home. You will continue on this journey. Then she gave me flexible working hours. She allowed me to work at home. And, so women need that support. It's just so impossible without an understanding work environment. And unfortunately, those are the barriers we are trying to break, to say responsible people, can work from anywhere and give them the benefit of the doubt. Do you know what it did, to me?
Could you also respond to that question by saying, and I want to reiterate Dr. Romila Maraj from NRF, who constantly says that women are not broken. You don't have to fix the woman. How do you fix society? I mean, you're a young Black woman. I'm sure you have cultural, religious, and other ritual barriers, the same as I do as an Indian person. And when you leave the workspace and you walk home, our cultural, societal norms walk in the door with us. Whereas in the workplace, we fight for equality and our place in society. The moment we go home, our wings are clipped mostly, and then we play the role of what society dictates. How do we change that?
Yeah. I think in our little corners, if we can just be real, be yourself. I was an outcast. I grew up being an outcast because I've been real. I am me, and what I do, because these cultural and patriarchal tendencies make their way into the bathrooms. And you see some insensitivities that are not meant to be insensitivities. And you see even women laughing about them because they don't even realize that we cannot perpetuate this. That's how our mindset is like. So what I do, I often try respectfully, very respectfully, because it's most of the time people are not aware. To show that, do you know that when you say, I can even sell my wife, like one board member said, that sell our wives to have fees for the students. And you can see that the morale was good. This is a person who's wanting to demonstrate commitment to educate youngsters. But now he says, we can even sell our wives. And I had to humbly say, women are not commodities. They cannot be bought or sold. They just cannot.
No, but I really like that response. And that's the message we got to get across. Because it is that societal norm, no matter how far we advance career-wise, these are the obstacles and hurdles that are constantly there. And I mean, I see it. Why must a woman sit on the left of her husband when conducting prayer? Because that's a ritual in my custom, right? Why must the man lead us around the fire when we're taking our marriage vows? That's a ritual custom. We do it because they are rituals that we have inherited from our culture. So every time, sometimes you try to put forward a voice of reason, somebody will respond with the issue of culture, my religion, it's my constitutional right, and these sorts of things. So I think we as a society have a lot more interrogation to do and to give and take. Yeah. I have one more question that Seppo has asked, but I would like for you to respond to this in your ethnic language. And with your permission, when we record this, that I want to flight this as a soundbite on our ASSAf social media, okay?
Sure.
So, and keep it short because we need to get a good soundbite for this.
Okay.
How can we use your story to encourage young people in South Africa and beyond to become achievers like yourself? Answer that in your ethnic language.
Yeah, okay. Story saka ne se ka botswa mo dikolong mo magaeng mo distrateng di street kids gore mo tswang ona leo ka bene a ona metsi a ona dikolo tse di phahameng a ona di facility tsa science a se bofelelo ba mo o yang o ka shumisha maiphitlhelo ao a botlhoko or e be manamelelo a bokamoso ya hao. I think I'll pause there.
Wonderful. The passion with which you said it, even though I couldn't understand it, carries a lot of weight. Yeah. No, you've been getting lots of congratulatory notes on the chats and the question and answers. And I'm sure that's honest tribute to what you have contributed to the sciences, the potential you still have to be unlocked to make a better intersection of science and society. That is where I believe the passion and the conviction that you have in yourself as an individual and what you can do with your learning curves along the way is going to benefit many, not just women, but scientists and people who also have come from very difficult bases. So now, if I were to, for the moment, nominate you to be the president of the country, what are the 3 things you would do to improve the life of the disadvantaged and the poverty-stricken populace of our country?
Well, ask them. I will ask them, what do you want from me? What's your number 1? And then work out with them how to get to that number 1.
Yeah, but you already, I mean, you've done social science work, you've done working in communities with disadvantages. So you already have a lead in terms of what the societal challenges are. I know yes. Co-creation is a nice way for impact, but if you ask me, you can't respond to my wish list. Realistically speaking, what would you do?
Yeah, look, Maslow's hierarchy of needs applies. You know, you cannot move to the next level before you deal with the basics. So I would want to deal with the basics. Do people have roofs above their heads? Do people have a meal at least a day? You know, yeah.
Okay. Anyway, well, if you ever run for president or for any other thing, you will definitely get my vote. And I'm just trying to see, there's a whole lot of things in the chat as well, but essentially it is people congratulating you for the iconic scientist that you are. And we will save that and share that with you after this. Refilwe, I must say, you have inspired us all today. I'm sorry that I had to truncate your the remainder of your presentation, but I think this series is intended to give you the opportunity to talk about your science a little bit. And given that this is Women's Month of, you know, the 167 women that make up the Academy, I thought that you would be one of those individuals that we would like to engage with. And you certainly have lived up to my expectations to what was asked of you. And again, I do apologize for rushing you on the latter part, but it was important for me to ask you some questions, as I say, standing on your feet, even though you're sitting in your comfortable chair, because this is what this series of In Conversation With is, as opposed to our webinars where we have a single, you know, a panel of people and we want them to fire over. This recording will be posted on our social media. And as you've heard, it's been transmitted live on Facebook, so people could watch it at their leisure later on. And yeah, so thank you. From my personal side and from all of us at the Academy, we wish you continued success in your new role and your new position. And I am sure that UJ is the richer for having you as part of the team. And yeah, so Godspeed in everything that you want. I now hand over to Henriette, who has a little thing to play at the end.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure, my joy, my privilege.
Awesome, awesome.
Viva UJ, viva.
Henriette?